Let's start the show the right way with the question, what are you made of?
You're made of what you are aware that you're made of.
Like that.
At the end of the day, everyone is exactly the same. Some people are asleep and some people are awake. Some people are aware of what they have in their hands or who they are, and most people are not. And that's really all the difference. It's the difference between whether you're a spiritually enlightened person or whether you're a wealthy person. It's just, are you aware of who you really are? And we're all the same.
So, so based on that, can you be whoever you decide to be?
You can.
Or is it predetermined?
It's
what I mean by that.
Life is not predestined per se, although we are given a hand to play. And we do have choices. So there's a combination between a predestined life. For example, if my mother and father were both professional tennis players, I'm predestined in my DNA to be pretty good at tennis. It's in my DNA. And if somebody else's mother and father are mathematicians at MIT and Harvard, in my DNA, I am predestined to have the proclivity toward mathematics. So we do have some basic direction, but how we play those cards and what we do is our own choice. And throughout life, life is a series of choices. Now, the good news, Mike, is you can never get it wrong. There are no bad decisions. There are no bad choices. There's no bad outcomes. They're just outcomes. There's no good or bad news. There's just news. How you react or respond to it is up to you. And whether you turn that into an advantage or play the victim is also up to you.
And what about when we get in trouble, though?
Well,
could that be bad news?
John D. Rockefeller, the richest man who ever lived, in today's money worth $700 billion, said, and it was quoted by Napoleon Hill in the book Think and Grow Rich, in all adversity are the seeds of a greater benefit. What most people say this is a bad thing, it really isn't. There was a story of a Chinese farmer, and this Chinese farmer had one horse, and that was all he had, very, very poor. And one day his son left the corral door open and the horse ran away. And all of his friends said, "This is terrible. This is bad news. Your horse ran away. It's terrible. It's bad." And the farmer says, "Bad? Maybe, maybe not." The next day, the horse came back and brought with it 10 Mustangs, wild horses. And now the guy's rich. And all of his friends says, "Wow, you got 10 horses. That's good." And the farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." His son gets on one of the horses to break it. The horse throws the son, and the son breaks his leg. And all of his friends says, "Oh my God, it's so terrible that your son broke the leg. That's bad news." And the farmer said, "Bad? Maybe, maybe not." The next day, the army came and took all the young men to go into war where they would most definitely get killed. But they didn't take his son because he had a broken leg. And all of his friends says, "That's so good." And the story goes on and on and on. Look, what we think is good, what we think is bad, maybe, maybe not. At the end of the day, whatever happens to us, we have to understand that the universe doesn't do things to us. It does things for us. In every situation is the seed of a greater benefit. There is no losses in life. We either win or we learn. So in every situation, you can learn. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times to create the incandescent light bulb. Every time was a disaster, another catastrophe, another failure. And they asked him, they said, "Mr. Edison, you failed 10,000 times trying to create the incandescent light bulb. How do you feel about that?" He goes, "I didn't fail 10,000 times. I successfully found 10,000 ways it would not work." He goes, "And every time I failed, I was closer to figuring out how to make it work." That's a mindset. And this is the difference between people that are happy and successful and people that are just bitching, whining, and complaining all the time and are miserable.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, for those of us that talk about this and study this and practice it, we really talk a lot about it and get out there with it. But then when we have to go through it ourselves, we're like, "Oh, shoot, man, now we got to practice it." And I've been there before. But I got this new way. Now I read the Bible a lot. And in the first part of James, the book of James, it talks about take joy in adversity, for that's when you're being forged. Now I'm not I don't memorize scripture. I remember the message in it. I'm one of those guys. But I said, you know what? I'm going to start being a freak. When things get tough and bad, I'm going to start getting excited instead of down and just see what happens. Because everything that, like the hindsight of things, Kevin, when we look back on it, we're like, man, I'm glad that happened. Like the girl that broke my heart back in the day. Man, I'm glad I didn't end up with her. Look at her now. I'm glad I'm married 22 years. Now, man, I'm married to the wife of my dreams. I wouldn't have had that if that didn't happen. Hindsight, yeah, but when you're in it, man, it can be tough.
It can be,
dark.
but I'll tell you the reasons why it can be bad for most people. But since you mentioned the scripture, there's another scripture that says, all things work together for good. Mm-hmm. For those who love and serve the Lord according to his purpose. So if you're on your purpose and you're dialed in and you're surrendering to the higher power, all things work together for the ultimate good. In every situation that's bad, don't we always say this? Someday we'll look back at this and laugh.
Yeah.
Well, if that's true, why wait? Laugh now.
I love it.
I mean, that's really it. Look, there's nothing you can do to change the situation. You know, there's that serenity prayer. God, grant me the patience to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and most importantly, the wisdom to know the difference. What you resist will persist. Most people don't acknowledge what is. You have to acknowledge it. You can't deny it. But if they acknowledge it, because they're always bitching, whining, and complaining, then what they do is they resist it. And you can't. What you resist will persist. You have to accept it, not resist it. And when you accept it, you allow that energy to transmute and go through you. This is how you go through challenging situations where we feel bad. Your dog got hit by a car, you feel bad. You find your lover is sleeping with somebody else, you feel horrible, you know? Okay, you can't deny how you're feeling. Acknowledge it, but don't resist it. Have a good cry, welcome it, allow that energy to pass through you, have a grieving process. You know, in many traditions around the world, when somebody would pass, there would be a grieving period. In that grieving period, in some traditions where you wear black. In other traditions, you wailed all day long for 7 days. And the wife of the man who got killed, she would wail, and I mean wail. And her job was every day for 7 days to go out and wail all day. Well, after 7 days, she's done wailing. You with me? And it's like the grieving is over now. She allowed herself, or he allowed himself, to get it out. And those traditions are not stupid traditions. They were wise traditions to acknowledge and accept and allow that energy to transmute or move through you so you can move on. You know, the past is a canceled check. You can't relive this. It's over. Stop living in the past. Most people live in the past, or they live in dreamland. They live in the future. No, you visit the past, you visit the future, but you live today.
Visit the past, visit the future, but live today. Love it. I love it. All right, so let's talk about your journey. Where did you come from in the first place? Everybody's got a story. What's your story?
Well, I grew up in a blue-collar community in Massachusetts. My dad was a welder. My mom was a full-time mother. Never went to college. I was told I had a learning disability. But when I was born, I could see energy. I could actually see energy. I could see things move. I could see the future a little bit. So I had all these predictions about what was going to happen. And I thought it was kind of weird. I didn't know that everyone didn't do this. So I immediately stopped talking about it. And then I met a person who came up to me at a bowling alley when I was 6 or 7 years old. My mom was it was candlepin bowling, for those of you who are in the Northeast.
By the way, there was smoke everywhere back then, right? I grew up in a bowling alley too. Smoke.
There was smoke everywhere, and some adult beverages. Okay,
yeah, of course.
But this was not 10-pin. This was candlepin bowling in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And I'm there at my mom and dad, and this guy comes up to me. And he says, "You can see what's in that corner, can't you?" And I look at him and I'm thinking, yeah, because there was some energy there. And he goes, "So can I?" He goes, "I'm going to show you how to control that." And so I got brought into an organization called the Brotherhood, which is, you can call it a group, an organization, a secret society, or whatever. Kind of like Freemasonry or Skull and Bones or whatever. It was kind of a unique group. And I was trained over the years how to use my mind and control my mind and see energy and move energy and do some things. And this allowed me to start manifesting what I wanted in life. And I made several $1 million before I was 18 years old. I made tens of millions of dollars before I was 21. Today, in today's dollars, it's been estimated my global business empire has done maybe over $10 billion in sales over the years. So I manifested a lot without going to college, without money, without connections, growing up on the wrong side of the track, but really learning how to think, as Napoleon Hill said in his book, think and grow rich. Use your mind to virtually create your reality. And some people talk about the law of attraction and different things like that. Most of the stuff that's out there is good, but they're missing many key elements, which is why the majority of people who try to apply those techniques really don't see the results.
And so you started to harness this power, being around the right people. And then what like, I want to look at the roadblocks that you had, personally at first that you had to overcome.
Yeah. And, I never looked at roadblocks as roadblocks or the things that stood in my way on my path as an obstacle. To me, they were simply stepping stones.
But also subconsciously, though, Kevin, I'm talking about things that are there, but you're not aware of, the subconscious blocks.
Okay, so here's how it works. We have counter intention. Sometimes we call it blocks. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have this, and it's in three main areas. The first area is from our ancestors on our mother's side. The second is from our ancestors on our father's side, and then from our own memories of this lifetime. And if you consider
past
previous
lives.
lifetimes, okay. So we know it's in the DNA because recently, and I'm talking the last 12 months, researchers have now proven that if your great-great-grandfather was in the war and killed and had trauma, that's in your DNA. That fear is in your DNA.
Yeah.
This is why you find a person who says, I'm fearful of water. I can't get near water. They have a phobia of water. And you find throughout their entire life, they've never been near water. They grew up in Iowa, nowhere near a lake or a river. But how are they so fearful of water? They don't have a swimming pool. They never had any friends with swimming pools. They've never been in a swimming pool. They've never been in a bathtub. How is it they have this unbelievable phobia of water? And then you find out that in their ancestors, one of their ancestors drowned. Mm-hmm. So it's in the DNA. So the block that you call it, sometimes called a counterintention, is in the DNA, or it's from our own memory. Mm-hmm. And these things key in or activate when we're dealing with life, and then we have an uncontrollable and many times irrational emotion stopping us from moving forward or making us self-sabotage ourselves. We've heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
And we know this. It's like every time I'm getting close to winning, I do something stupid. It's like I self-sabotage myself. There's a counterintention stopping you or preventing you from succeeding. And unless you clear those out or transmute that energy or blow the charge, in the East, they're called samskaras, energetic imprints. In the West, sometimes they're called engrams from different traditions. But they're blocks of energy that can actually be in the physical body or in the mind that key in or activate or come to surface. Sometimes we say, they're pushing my buttons. That person's pushing my buttons.
Yep.
Or I feel triggered. It's the same thing. That energy gets keyed in and we have this uncontrollable or irrational emotion or thought pattern that is working against us, trying to make our goals happen or make our dreams come true. And unless we clear those out, we're going to have a challenge. It's going to be like we're feeling that there's a headwind, that there's invisible forces pushing against us, and everything in life is a struggle.
Yeah. So you studied L. Ron Hubbard?
I know of L. Ron Hubbard. Actually, I met L. Ron Hubbard, also one of his main proteges, which was Werner Erhard, who started EST.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Then you're speaking my nomenclature.
Okay, yeah. So I knew both, and Hubbard was in the Brotherhood, so he learned a lot of the same material that he taught about how the mind works. And
there's so much negativity out there in regards to this information, and they call it psychobabble and all this other stuff. But man, the experience that I've had in reading the books and studying different things, man, it's like, how did I not know about this before? I let other people and their BS stop me from before.
Well, that's
stopped me before.
That's interesting, because one of the major holdbacks or stops that a person will face in life is what the great motivational speaker and good friend of mine, passed away now, Zig Ziglar said.
Yeah.
He said, you can't be a SNIOP. And that stands for someone who is susceptible to the negative influence of other people. Most people are susceptible to the negative influence of other people. You read a comment online, anonymous, and it affects you. You just believe it.
Yeah.
And anything that's negative, you accept more readily than anything that's positive. If you read one negative review at a restaurant and there's 10 positive reviews, studies show that you won't go to the restaurant because there was one negative review, even though you read 11 reviews, 10 of which were positive. One was negative, but that one overcomes the 10 positive ones and you don't go. So people are sheeple. They allow themselves to be manipulated and controlled by the negative influence of other people, other people's opinions. This is if there's one thing that causes people to be miserable, unhappy, and unsuccessful, it's they listen to the wrong individuals. Your income is always the average of your 5 best friends. And when you find successful people, they hang around people that are motivated, inspired, enthusiastic, uplifting, and successful. They don't hang around losers. They hang around and associate with winners. Aristotle Onassis, richest man in the world back in the 60s, said that. He said if he lost all of his money, the one thing he would do was he would go to places where wealthy people, successful people were, and he would hang around there so he could basically bathe in their energy because success rubs off. And he would listen to how they speak. He would listen to what they say. He would basically just be in that frequency of success because that is what he would need in order to reestablish his wealth.
Yeah, yeah. So what did you do to clear out engrams, clear out the negative counter intentions?
In the Brotherhood, we ran what's called a series of processes where another individual who had those counter intentions cleared would, via a series of techniques, activate in my field any blocks or energetic imprints, samskaras, or counter intention. Sometimes there's a statement, an affirmation, sometimes called the postulate that's there. Sometimes there's a point of confusion that's there. And we together would blow that out. And when that gets blown out, physical mass actually leaves the body and you become clearer, you become more certain, you see better, you come out of your trance. So now, when you start moving forward, you don't have any invisible force pushing against you. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're walking up a mountain and you're walking up that mountain, so you train. You go to the treadmill and you're training your muscles to get really strong. You're training your cardiovascular and you start walking up the mountain, but you just get so tired and it's like, I can't do it, and you stop. That's like going up towards success. What you don't realize is you have strapped on your back 500 pounds of rocks. Yeah. Well, of course you're not going to go up the mountain because you got this counter intention, but you don't know it's there. So in addition to strengthening yourself, which you need to do to go up the mountain or attain success, reach the top, you have to get rid of the baggage. And unless you get rid of the baggage, you're never going to make it up. And if you do, if you're pushing a cart with rocks and you stop pushing, the cart's going to go back down. That's why people backslide or they go in reverse or they lose all their gains. They make money, then lose it all. They make money, then lose it all. They make money and lose it all because counterintention is pulling you back.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing I always talk about is if you don't establish your own intention, which gives your attention direction, you're going to be using someone else's intention. And then your attention is going to be directed by that intention. That's the counter intention.
That's exactly true. And you've heard the phrase, a person really, when they think about it, has to increase their self-determinism. They have to become cause over their environment as opposed to be effect over their environment. And the difference or the analogy is if you're in a boat and your boat has no rudder and no engine, you can't control the boat.
Yep.
Even if you have a couple oars, if there's a lot of wind and a lot of current, you can't control it. You're at effect. You're being controlled by the environment. But now, if you're in that same boat and you realize, wait a minute, I have an engine here and I have a key, and you turn the engine on and you now understand that I have a steering wheel, I have a keel, everything's there. I have a rudder that can direct me, and I have power. Now, no matter what the wind is, no matter what the current's doing, you can go where you want to go. You can overcome the environment. And as a human being, we have the power to be at cause over our environment instead of at effect. We can go from here to there, regardless of the wind, regardless of the waves and the current, regardless of what else is there. And interestingly enough, when you make that decision, because success is a decision away, when you make that decision to take power and take control, the wind goes away and the waves stop. That's what people don't realize. Everything gets easier anyway, because the whole universe actually comes to your aid and will help the person who knows where he's going and determined to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you describe, because I've experienced this and I would love to hear your experience from this, the phenomenon that happens when you free up that condensed energy?
There's a lot of end phenomena that occur when counter-intention is reduced. And I'm not going to say eliminated totally, but when you reduce counter-intention, you have a sense of power and control. So if I were to ask somebody, do you want control? Most people resonate with that. Do you fear losing control? Most people resonate with that. Imagine getting to the point where you no longer want control, no longer need control, no longer fear of losing control, but just know you have total control. Imagine being in that space, regardless of what the external conditions and situations are. You still have that sense of power and knowingness. And we can watch movies like that, where James Bond gets thrown into whatever situation he's in, but he has that confident look like, I know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Jack Reacher is another guy who always is
Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible latest movie, was so wild.
Yeah, and he's got this total control. I remember in the Jack Reacher one, 8 guys are going to beat him up, and he's like, look, I've been here before. Let me tell you what's going to happen. And it's just like terrible situation, but he has this complete knowingness. I'm going to hit you and you. You guys are going to run away.
Yep. Well, there's this thing where you can actually control other human beings and other objects, and people can't wrap their brain around it. They can't think big enough that that's actually possible to manipulate your environment. Yeah,
your mind affects matter, and we know this in many instances through scientific testing, not just theory. Dr. Emoto proved this with water. Took glasses of water, tap water, and they froze it, and then they sliced it and looked at it under a microscope, and they all had the exact same crystallization formation. Then they took the water, and one person would broadcast a frequency from his mind in between alpha and theta on a narrow beam of love. And then they would take that water, same water that they just tested a minute ago, and now they froze it and look at it, and the crystallization is completely different, and it's beautiful. Then they take the water and they broadcast a beam. When I say broadcast a beam, I'm just talking looking at it and just using a technique of broadcasting. And then they put hate out, and then they would freeze it, slice it, put it under a microscope, and the crystallization was horrible looking.
Chaos.
So we know that the mind affects matter. Now, that's very important because the body is 70% water. So if I beam energy toward you, I'm affecting the cells in your body. So you have to be able to know how to counteract it. That's why people say, oh, they're toxic. That person's toxic. Well, in a way they are, because their energy is affecting you. The problem is you're allowing it to affect you. So you can be impervious to any toxic people. People say, Kevin, what do you do when you're around toxic people? I'm never around toxic people. Well, number one, maybe I don't attract them into my life, but even if they are, they don't affect me anyway, so it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be affected. So we do know that the mind affects matter. And there's other instances as well. There was a machine. I was flying in a plane a couple years ago, and there was a magazine in there, and they had an ad for a device. You put this headband on, and it had some electrodes you hook up to into your skull and a couple of antennas. Then there was a little ball, and the ball had an antenna in the middle. And you put the ball down, and with your thoughts, all you did is say, move to the right, and the freaking ball would go to the right. You didn't say a word, you just thought it.
Yeah.
And then it would move to the left, and you'd move forward, up. I did it, and I had the damn thing bouncing up and down. They were like, how do you do that? So you can learn how to control your mind to affect matter, affect people, and effectively create and manifest the type of life that you want.
Yeah. So how important is it to harness it and accept that, right? Because, for example, if you create something in your world and you achieve a goal or something, and you react like, you put it on a pedestal, you're like, wow, I can't believe that happened. This is amazing. You're taking your power away and forgetting and having short-term memory on the fact that you're the one that created that, right? So how should people react when they do accomplish something that they created, to do it the right way so that they can replicate and grow from there?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a word called belief. There was a book called The Magic of Believing. And I found the actual ad that I saw, I think 1972, maybe 74, somewhere on there. It was a full-page ad in a magazine, and it said it had a picture of Liberace. And Liberace said, I was broke when I read this book, The Magic of Believing. 18 months later, I became the highest paid performer in the world. And there was all these other celebrities who said they read the book, The Magic of Believing, and it completely transformed their life because they understood belief. Fast forward to the movie Star Wars. I think it was the second episode, where Luke is being trained by Yoda on that little island there. Luke's plane went into the lake, and Yoda was training Luke how to use his mind to move matter.
Yep.
And he couldn't get the plane out of the lake. So Yoda walks over, says, get out of my way. And Yoda uses his mind, and the plane comes up out of the lake onto the land. And Luke says, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, that is why you fail.
Yeah.
Because you have to have belief. Believe and you receive.
Yeah.
Doubt and go without.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. When I had some things cleared, I was in LA and I was in Hollywood, and I was looking up at the Hollywood Hills, and I just felt like the biggest being. I felt like I took up the whole LA. Like it was just the wildest.
Were you at
feeling,
CC
man.
over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was just standing out on this balcony with the windows. They had the old windows, and I pushed it open. Hollywood signs there, and I'm like, wow, man. I feel like I was everything, but I just was so big, my being, and I was just like, I want more of this, And I just visualized myself up on one of those houses that had the infinity pool looking over LA, and coming out with my coffee, butt naked, standing there in the morning time, like, this is mine.
You probably had a different sense of who you really were.
Oh yeah, it was wild, and it comes and goes, and I have to keep working on it. It doesn't stay with you without intention and working.
Correct. And the more you free yourself, and I'll give you an analogy. If you put yourself in a hot air balloon, and you want to go up high so you have this amazing perspective, you have to fill the hot air balloon up with hot air.
Yeah.
But you're not going to go very high if the basket is loaded up with sandbags, or if it's tied to the ground. Mm-hmm. So you have to get rid of the ties to the ground first, and then you have to get rid of the sandbags. That's the only way it can go up. At the same time, you have to fill the balloon with hot air. A human being is exactly the same way. If we want to achieve great states of awareness or consciousness, why is that even important? Because when you realize who you are, you feel like you're Superman, and thus you can do more in life. You are happier, you're more certain, you have a greater sense of fulfillment and purpose, you have a greater sense of stability, and you become powerful. You feel in control, and therefore you can choose to create the life you want. That's why you want to have a large amount of consciousness or awareness of who you really are as a creative being. We are beings that are designed to create.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to you have to basically come out of your trance. You have to wake up. And the way you do that is getting rid of the ties or untie those ties that are keeping you on the ground. And then over time, start getting rid of the sandbags while at the same time filling up your balloon with hot air. It's all three of those things. And that's how you start soaring in life and really living an amazing, wonderful life, regardless of what the external conditions and situations are. You're capable of handling adversity with grace and ease, and you never even look at things as adversity or challenges or obstacles. You actually look at life as just a series of adventures.
Yeah. Yeah. And now on your journey, let's go back to your journey. As you're doing very well, successful businesses, becoming one of the greatest marketers out there, great intentions, getting people healthier, guiding people into becoming more able, more self-determined. You have some counter intentions come your way, right? And number one, I want to know, like, how do you handle bad PR when things happen that when people hear about it, they would get obviously bad news travels fast, and then people get it, a perception from that.
I was traveling in Australia with President Gorbachev, my friend. We were on a private jet traveling together, and General Norman Schwarzkopf was with us. The richest man in Australia, Kerry Packer, was there, was a friend of mine. And we were traveling together, and there was a couple other businessmen on there too, very successful guys. And one of the questions came up as we were chatting, we had a several-hour flight, was how to handle bad publicity, because one of the fellows was getting blistered in the newspapers in Sydney, Australia, for some suspect stock trading. And there was some investigation going on. So he was getting crucified in the papers. And we all kind of talked about how we deal with it. And everyone on that plane said the same thing. I don't read the papers. I don't read the news. Why would I do that? It's all manipulated. It's either a bull-faced lie or a misrepresentation or deceptive or completely misleading. Why would you read it? All it's going to do is get you frustrated. So none of that matters. And when you're free of samskaras or energetic imprints or engrams, none of that's going to affect you anyway, but why would you put the garbage in?
Yeah.
So I don't put garbage in. Remember, garbage in, garbage out?
Yep.
Back in the early days of computers, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You have to put good code in or information in or good data in order to get a good answer from the computer. So I'm not going to fill my computer with garbage. It doesn't really matter what people say or think. It's completely irrelevant. It doesn't affect me or my lifestyle.
Even in regards to your brand?
It doesn't matter. Okay. Because I am not focused on any particular result, nor am I attached to any particular result.
Okay.
So as I go through life, I respond instead of react to things. And I understand that sometimes life will give me something that was off my radar screen. I didn't see it. But I know the universe does things for me, not to me, so I look at it as an exciting adventure. I don't look at things as bad. I don't look at things as adversity. I look at things as another exciting adventure. When I wrote the book, Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About, it was #1 on the New York Times list 26 weeks in a row. It sold over 50 million copies. The #1 best-selling health book of all time. It exposed the pharmaceutical industry and the Food and Drug Administration and how government and drug companies work together to hide the truth about non-drug and non-surgical ways to cure and prevent disease. It was groundbreaking work. People loved it. I was on every major talk show, front page of every major newspaper. Great. The government sued me. They held me in contempt of court. They took everything away and put me in prison for almost 10 years for the non-crime of contempt of court. I wasn't charged with a crime. I was held in contempt, and I was in prison for 8.5 years. In a federal prison for 8.5 years without being charged with a crime, the longest sentence in the history of America for contempt of court. And they took everything away. They just confiscated everything. People don't know that the government can do that. There is illegal search and seizure. Forget that. Forget the Constitution. Forget the Bill of Rights. Government does what they want. And the judges just rubber stamp whatever the government says. Welcome to America. You're under arrest. So people say, how did you deal with that adversity? I go, it wasn't adversity. The universe blessed me. The universe cleared my plate. I mean, I had thousands of employees at the time around the world. Everything was taken away. I came out healthier than ever before, more in shape than ever before, speaking Italian and German. My bridge game was spectacular. My tennis game was really good. My yoga practice was better than ever before. I wrote the entire Science of Personal Mastery course over 100 lessons, each lesson over 50 pages. That's over 5,000 pages of work that I would never have the time to write that I wrote there. I wrote other things as well. I read more than ever before. And I came out with a complete clean slate, a blank canvas to do exactly what I wanted. I was given a gift that all my friends scratched their head and said, you are the luckiest son of a gun I've ever seen. You came out, you have no stress. You probably added 20 years to your life. You look amazing and you have no debt. Everything's gone and you can do whatever you want. You have no responsibilities. So I didn't look at that as any adversity. I looked at it as a gift from God and I was blessed like nobody else was blessed. That's how I looked at it. That's sometimes called reframing, but at the end of the day, it was my reality, and to this day, it's still my reality.
Now, were there moments where you had to work on that, though? Were there moments where you kind of slipped back a little bit?
For me, no. When I was there, I was excited all the way up to it. It was, and people around me were scratching their head because they'd never seen anything like that before. But the reason is I had gone through so much training in the Brotherhood. I had gone through so much clearing, if you will, or transmuting of stuff and getting rid of things where buttons could be pushed or stuff could be activated or come to surface or keyed in or triggered. I didn't have any of that. So I was in a really good place. I had really been well trained mentally. Other people, you read the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was in a concentration camp. Okay, now I was not in a concentration camp. I was in a federal prison camp, okay? Yeah. We played tennis, okay? So imagine Viktor Frankl, without that training, being in a concentration camp every day wondering if he was going to be sent to the ovens, okay, and cremated and killed, and watching this horror every single day. But he still was capable of using his mind, as he talked about in that book, and maintaining his state of equanimity.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff, man. All right. So, Kevin, we're up against the clock. I want to just touch on at the end here what the vision is from here. Where are you going now?
Well, I'm semi-retired. I do have a website, KevinTrudeau.com. And if people go there, I have my latest book, which will be coming out in another month, Your Wish is Your Command. I have the audio series now. That's available. I have a whole series of things that I offer. And I'm offering people information based on my experience. So these are things that I know, not just know about, whether it's making money or management or spiritual enlightenment and liberation and freedom, how to deal with adversity, a whole host of things. So what I'm doing now, Mike, is really empowering people so they can improve the quality of their life and standard of living and become the person they always wanted to become. And that's what we do. So KevinTrudeau.com is the website people can go to get more information. And I also have a podcast on all the major platforms that people can watch as well.
So as you were watching the election and how they were going after Trump and the Maha movement with Bobby Kennedy coming out, are you tempted to go back into the health and biohacking longevity space as well?
Well, I am coming up with a brand new version of the Natural Cures book that'll also be published by the end of the year because my original version came out in 2025. And I had Bobby Kennedy on my original radio show 15 years ago when I was one of the first guys talking about that. Now with the Make America Healthy Again movement, many of the things that I talked about in my book, Natural Cures, are now front page news. Fluoride in the water, red dyes, the food dyes, the food additives, vaccines, all these things that I talked about I was attacked. I mean, violently attacked. I said that talcum powder causes cancer, and they wanted to put a bullet in my head on NBC. Well, guess what? Now, what do we know? Talcum powder causes cancer. I said Vioxx is a deadly drug that's going to kill people. They laughed at me. 200,000 people today are dead because they took that drug that the Food and Drug Administration stamped safe and effective. It was neither. And I was proven to be right. I have a whole file called Kevin Was Right.
Kevin, listen, man, I want to thank you for your service and the courage that's come, that it took to do what you've done. And a lot of people don't know that. I'm glad we got to get to some of the story out here today. And I want to go in deeper with you when we get in studio live sometime. But thank you very much. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Glad to be here, Mike. You have a super day.